Hi everyone, so I wanted to make a quick video for you all that goes over each of the milestone projects that you will be submitting this term, as well as the final project. So the final project for this class will be a compilation of the 3 milestone assignments that you'll complete. So many of the classes here at SNHU, specifically in the Human Services Department, are all structured the same way, meaning that they follow that format. So if you've taken Human Service course here previously, which I'm assuming all of you have, then this class is going to follow kind of that same structure. So before we get into each of the milestones, I wanted to go over some of the project guidelines and rubric for, again, the final. So the final project for this course is the creation of a case study and care plan evaluation. So this is something that if you choose to work in the human service field after you graduate, or even now if you're working in the field, depending on what role you're in, you may be asked to do. This is something that's very common in child protective services, adult protective services, to have a client to get all of their information and their details, and to then take that, assess for what the needs are, and then interventions so that there is a care plan to help them meet the needs that they have through a variety of different services and referrals. So this is very similar to something that you will likely do in the field at some point. So the project is divided into 3 milestones, which are going to be submitted throughout the course. So this is to scaffold learning, so to allow you to integrate the new information that you're learning and ensure that you have a quality final submission. So the 3 milestones are going to be due, the first one will be due in Module 2, so this week, this Sunday. The next will be due in Module 4, and then the last milestone will be due in Module 6. And then the final submission is due in Module 7. The reason that these kind of milestones exist is so that you can receive feedback from an instructor. So you're going to be receiving feedback from me on each of the milestone submissions, and then you can incorporate that feedback I give you into your final submission. So these milestones will serve as a starting point for your final case study and care plan evaluation, which will be submitted as one final document and will be graded using the final project rubric. So then I'll let you all read through this section, which talks about the kind of the mastery of the following course outcomes that you're supposed to demonstrate through this assignment. So this next part right here is super important. So I actually had a question about what case study you were supposed to use for the milestone submission this week. So the milestone submission for this week and all of the subsequent weeks, it's going to be this case study right here. And so again, if you go to the course assignment information, go to the final project, it's going to show you the case study and care plan. And so you can see it's 2.5 paragraphs long. It introduces the family, a Pacific Islander family. There are 3 family members. They've been referred to a service center by the state's Department of Child and Family Services for a few different reasons. So one child's been placed in foster care for physically abusing his younger brother. CPS was brought in. One of the children was removed from the home. The family was referred to counseling. In addition to acting out aggressively, there's good evidence that the older child is a substance abuser, as a teacher at his school found him sniffing paint several times. Also, through counseling, it was discovered that he had been abused by a previous stepfather, and he was also suspended from school for attempting to stab a schoolmate. So the mom's apartment management company sent her a letter of their intent to evict her, stating there were several residents that complained about feeling fearful around her son and his behavior, noise from family arguments. Mom is hoping to get a job soon, but she's currently unemployed and is having difficulty making rent payments and buying sufficient food for the family. She wants the family to be reunited, is willing to take parenting classes, enter into services that are suggested by the state, but she's worried about putting her youngest child in danger. So then it goes through kind of a list of the strengths of the family. So obviously they're in crisis. There's a lot that's not going well, but there are some strengths to draw upon as you are looking at interventions and how you can use a strengths-based perspective to build upon the good things that already are there in the family. In the care plan from the state's Department of Child and Family Services, the following interventions and referrals are recommended. And so these will be things that you need to specifically incorporate and address in your care plan because it has been recommended by the department. So oftentimes, again, in a real world setting, you will, let's say you're working in Child Protective Services, you have this family, there will be certain interventions that you have to recommend. So that's going to look different based on a lot of different factors. But because it's specifically telling us that the state has recommended these things, we need to make sure it's in the care plan. So mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, parenting classes, mental health counseling for the youngest son, legal assistance to avoid eviction, and then some type of emergency assistance to buy groceries. So just be mindful that as you're looking at what the interventions are going to be, that you make sure that all 6 of these are included. Now, obviously, you can add more as needed, but you want to make sure that you include these. So again, you have your case study here, and this is what you're going to be basing each of the milestones off of, is this case study here and this information below. So your case study and care plan evaluation should address the following prompt. So I'll let you read through that, and then it talks about the critical elements that must be addressed. So the first milestone is going to be a case analysis looking at needs within the family. The second milestone will be care plan looking at interventions. The third milestone would be care plan that will explain the care plan itself and how it addresses the client's needs. And the last section that you'll add, and this is not part of any of the milestones, but this is going to be for practitioners. So discuss risk of practitioners working with, again, trauma survivors, and how they can do things to support their well-being, referrals that you would potentially make for a professional working in this field, and looking at interventions that are evidence-based to be effective. So if we go down here, it has information on each of the milestones. So today we're just going to look at milestone 1, and in the following weeks I will go over milestone 2 and 3 in a video. So milestone 1, again, is an outline of case analysis needs. So in module 2, you're going to submit a 2 to 3 page outline addressing all of the critical elements as listed in section 1 using this template that's provided here. It's really important that you utilize this template specifically. Okay, this is part of the assignment, is being able to follow instructions and to utilize any templates that are given. And so actually using this template takes a lot of work out of it for you because you're not having to try and create this template yourself. So make sure that you download this and type your assignment directly into here, instead of trying to, maybe, like I've had students before, they have tried to like look at the template and then type it up themselves in a new document, which is like way too much work. You're probably going to miss things, leave things out. So make sure that you use this template. So I'm actually going to show you what the template looks like. So this is it. So the outline here is based on the critical elements that are required for the milestone 1 submission. You're going to use this outline and submit it when complete. You're going to address each item below with at least 2 sentences for each question. Okay. So if we look at A says assess the impact of physical trauma on the family. Okay. So you're going to be answering each of these points. So like in this case, 1 to 4. So for each of these questions, you should have at least 2 sentences. Sometimes students overlook this, and it will impact your grade, because if you have 1 sentence, let's say, that's not going to be enough information to adequately address any of these questions. Even 2 sentences, although that's just the minimum, it's probably going to take you more than 2 sentences to fully answer each of these questions. So what are the short-term impacts of this trauma? That's question number 1, which should have, again, at least 2 sentences. What are the long-term impacts of this trauma? Again, at least 2 sentences. How do the impacts differ? And then the last question, how are they similar? So you're going to go through with A, B, C, D, and E, and you're going to look at the questions that fall under the heading, and using at least 2 sentences, answer the questions. Okay, the next part to be really aware of is the fact that you need to cite any sources in APA format and include a reference page. Okay, so you don't have to include a cover page for this. I don't believe the rubric asks for that, but you do have to include a reference page. So everybody here should be familiar with APA format. If you're not, I would encourage you to look at the one of the announcement posts that I made that has some resources. There are a ton of resources that will get you up to speed with APA formatting. It's not difficult once you learn it. Once you kind of have it down, it's really just like substituting the information. There are citation generators that you can use. I don't have a problem with that. You just need to be aware of the fact that you have to enter the information in the correct boxes of the citation generator for it to give you the correct output. So sometimes if you don't put information in the right spot, you're not going to get the correct citation, which will obviously impact your grade. So sometimes it's just easier to learn the format yourself. You can use the citation generator and then just kind of look over and make sure everything is right. And if it's not, make appropriate changes. So again, with the formatting, that's going to impact your grade on the critical element of articulation of response. So as part of that, it's going to ask me to evaluate the grammar that you use, whether there's punctuation, periods, question marks, things of that nature. It's going to ask me to look at the sentence structure. So does it make sense? If someone else is reading this, are they able to read it easily? And then another part of that again is the citations. So in APA format, you need to include an in-text citation that corresponds to a citation on the reference list. So if you have a citation in your reference page at the end, I should be able to go to at least one place in the assignment and see an in-text citation for that specific source. So you should never have a reference at the end that isn't shown somewhere throughout the body of the work as an in-text citation. So again, if you're needing more help with that, you're going to have to utilize some outside resources. And so the Writing Center may be able to assist you with that. There are a lot of videos that you can, search for on YouTube and watch. If you have specific questions that, you want to run by me, you can do that. So just make sure that you do that appropriately because you don't want to be losing out on easy points. And so again, citations at this point should be something that you're super familiar with. This is a 300 level course, which means that it is a junior level university course. And so all of the human service classes here at SNHU utilize APA. And so this should be something that you're familiar with. But again, if you're not, that's okay. But that's what the standard is going to be. And that's what you're going to be graded by, is using that standard. Let's see. So again, if you look here, there is additional information that you need to review that will help you with Milestone 1. It gives you some kind of prompting questions, some considerations, things to kind of help get your mind thinking about how to answer those questions that are outlined in the template. And so again, this milestone is going to be graded with the Milestone 1 rubric. So what we're going to do now is, again, you can look down here, and I would encourage you to go ahead and review all of this information. It was actually one of the things that you were supposed to do last week, was to look at the final project rubric, to kind of know what the course is going to look like in terms of structure. So we're not going to look at this yet, but make sure that you look at it yourself. And what we are going to do is we're going to look at the Milestone 1 guidelines and rubric. specifically. So again, we've pretty much already reviewed this on the other web page, but again, if you just want to go, instead of looking at the final project guidelines, look at the milestone 1. It gives you, again, the template here, asks you to create a 2 to 3 page outline, questions to consider, other information to consider. These are the critical elements, which again are all of this information is contained in the template that you can download. So again, it has a note here. So this is important. The milestone here is an outline of the case analysis needs section of your final case study and care plan evaluation. Use feedback from your instructor on the outline to shape your final submission. So like we were kind of talking about earlier, the reason that we have these milestones is so I can give you feedback and you can incorporate that feedback and make changes that will improve your final project that you submit. So I'm going to point out in grading each of these milestones things that you're doing really well. So strengths that it seems like you have in your writing and in your kind of thinking and thought process. You know, when you're on the right track and you've highlighted some really important information, I'm going to point that out. So I'm going to point out all the positives that you're doing. And I'm also going to point out areas where you can improve, because the areas where you can improve are areas where you've probably lost points. And if you make the appropriate improvements based on the feedback I give you, and then incorporate that feedback into what's going to be the final, you'll probably earn more points for that section. So whenever I point things out, you know, and encourage you to change something, I'm doing that with the intent of helping to grow your knowledge, and also with the intent of helping you to more thoroughly address the questions in the rubric and kind of maximize the amount of points that you get. Because obviously the more points you get on each assignment, the higher your grade is going to be at the end of the class. So what to submit? The outline of your case analysis needs section must be submitted using the case analysis outline template. As indicated in the template, you should respond to each question directly in the template with a response of at least 2 sentences. Use 12-point Times New Roman font with 1-inch margins, which again, if you use the template, the margins are already set. 1-inch margins are standard margins on a document. And again, any source is cited in APA format. So please use the 12-point Times New Roman font. That's because it's really easy to read. Sometimes people will change to these like really fancy fonts that are like, it makes it very difficult to read a lengthy submission. So you can see here each of the critical elements, and then there are 3 categories that you can fall into when it comes to proficiency. So not evident means you're going to get no points. Needs improvement means that you're going to get 75% of the available points, so 75% of 18. And then proficient means that you're going to get 100% of the available points, so you would get 18 out of 18 points. So it's going to look at each of the points that are on the template, okay? And here's that articulation of response I was talking about earlier, which is going to ask me to evaluate whether the citations were correct, whether there's issues with grammar, spelling, syntax, or organization, okay? Just a note related to spelling. At this point, there's really no excuse for errors with spelling. I mean, they slip through every now and then, but there are things like Grammarly, free versions that you can use. Obviously, like Microsoft Word, if you're using that, it can catch, it's going to catch errors with spelling. Grammarly will even, I think with the free version, look at some grammar issues and point some of those minor things out. So just be aware that it's really important that you make sure that your submissions are, you know, again, easily readable. They're organized appropriately, like sentences are in a structure sequence that makes sense, that you're, you know, capitalizing I and other things that you should be using punctuation, appropriate spelling. And this may seem kind of inconsequential, but one of the reasons that it's really important is because, and if you're already working in the field or working in another career, you may already have encountered this, but this kind of reflects on your your knowledge and your professionalism. And oftentimes in human services fields, you will be documenting things on a regular basis. And especially if you're working in an area like child protective services, your documents may be subpoenaed at some point. And so that means that, just because you wrote this documentation, you're not the only person that's ever going to read it. You're going to have lawyers that are reading it, judges, physicians sometimes, other service providers, maybe psychologists or psychiatrists, other mental health professionals. And so you want your writing to be clear, and you want it to reflect well on you. But it's also kind of part of our responsibility to clients is that when we make care plans or case plans for them, or when we document a session that we have with them, that we make sure that we articulate things well. And that's part of providing just competent services to clients. So that's why that's really important, to make sure that you're hitting all these marks down here. In terms of any other questions when it comes to milestone 1, I did get a couple questions that I'm going to pull up that I want to go ahead and address for the whole class, just because some of you may also be having this question. So one student had a question about if only part of the template is due for this project. So you will be submitting this template for milestone 1, the case analysis outline template. So this one right here, this is what you're going to submit for milestone 1. Okay. Another question had to do with the wording of this point, which asks you to, again, address the impact of physical trauma on the children and family. So when we think about physical trauma, here you are going to be looking at trauma that was caused by some type of, let me see, I'm going to reword that. You're going to be looking at trauma that happened to like the body. So trauma that caused some type of physical issue. So for instance, one thing that we know from the case study is that, let's see, that the older child in the home was abused by a previous stepfather. And so we can think about, okay, we know that there was abuse that took place here. We know that there was abuse that happened from the oldest son to the younger son. And so with that in mind, what are going to be some of the short-term impacts of that trauma? Obviously, we don't know exactly what kind of physical abuse happened, but we know that it happened. And so we can look at just kind of generally what research indicates happens when someone experiences physical trauma. So again, you're going to be looking at trauma that happened to the body, and how that would impact an individual. Let's see, the last question. Someone was kind of confused about if you have to come up with your own case study for any of the milestones. And no, this is a really large piece to make sure that you get right. Each of the milestones are going to be completed using this information from the case study and care plan here. That again is outlined in the final project guidelines and rubric. So these are just some of kind of, again, the common questions that people are coming in with. And I hope this gives you a better idea of how the class is structured. Obviously, in between the final project and the milestone submissions, you're going to have discussions that are due. This week you have a handout that's due. So there are going to be a few other assignments here and there that are going to be also related to the role and impact of trauma with children and families, which is what the class is centered on. So that's everything I have for you all right now. Again, I'm going to check in with another video next week to look at milestone 2, and then there will be a third video that looks at milestone 3. Really quickly, I do want to mention something else. I would encourage you, and this is just completely, advice that's optional to take. I would really encourage you that each milestone submission, as soon as you get the feedback from that and I grade it, that you then start to work on incorporating the feedback into that particular section instead of waiting until week 7 and then trying to go back through each of the milestones and like make corrections, add information. So it's really a good idea to carve out some time throughout the following weeks that, again, as soon as you get the milestone 1, your grade for that back, that you look at the feedback and go ahead and start to make changes while that information is more fresh on your mind. And then that way you're not kind of putting all of this off until the very end of the class. So again, if you want to put it all off until week 7 and make all the changes, you can do that. Some people do that and it works fine. But a lot of people find that it's kind of a lot of pressure and they can get really bogged down in that process. So just that's something to be mindful of. So as always, if you have any questions, you can email me and I will respond typically within 24 hours. Normally it's sooner than that. So take care.